Baroness Philippine de Rothschild is here with me. She runs the Mouton Rothschild Chateau. It is a legendary vineyard, but this empire is about more than wine. It is about art, great art. The vineyard has commissioned leading artists to design a new label every year since 1945. Designs have been painted by Picasso and Chagall, Bacon and Warhol, Dali and Mata. This year, the artist is His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, an old family friend. The Baroness is here in New York for a special exhibition of the art from the Mouton Rothschild labels. It is being held at Sotheby's. The auction house is also hosting a special auction linked to this exhibit. She will be selling wines from her private cellars. She's been running the chateau since 1988. She inherited it from her father, who inherited it from his father, all the way back to 1853. Her sons are expected to take over after she retires. One will handle the business side and one will handle the art. I am pleased to have her here at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you.
I got that about right, did I not?
You got it very right. Even, I would say, accurate.
Well, that's good. Take me back to, just to understand the family.
Yes.
Take me back to Nathaniel Rothschild.
Yes. Again, you're being very accurate. Nathaniel Rothschild, 1853, English branch of the family,
Right.
son of Nathan, the famous Nathan,
Right.
who with Waterloo and all this.
Exactly.
You know. And Nathaniel bought Mouton, had married, by the way. So I always say, you know, that the family is the five arrows, which are the five sons of Amschel, who left Frankfurt. I mean, one stayed in Frankfurt. They all went around Europe and created those extraordinary banks. And I always say that I descend from two arrows because Nathaniel Rothschild, English, married Charlotte, French Rothschild, daughter of James, French James. So I descend from them both. And you know, there was a lot of intermarrying in the family at the time. And so Nathaniel married Charlotte and bought Mouton in 1853, more or less for a mixture of his health, and he never set foot in Mouton, and also to have his wine, his own wine, at his own table. So Mouton really became his property on that year, which means that we had a great affair to celebrate the 150th anniversary in 2003 of Nathaniel. Then it came down directly at the fifth generation, which is me, a first woman owner. The others were men, you know.
Yes.
Rather...
But who was your grandfather?
Henry, my father Philippe, my grandfather Henry, my great-grandfather James, but not the great French James, another James, and my great-great-grandfather Nathaniel. It's very close, really. It's very near.
Your father was a famous baron.
Oh, yes, of course. My father Philippe.
Yes.
Absolutely. That's where my name, Philippine.
Yeah. But he's enormously famous because
of course.
He also, during the war, went with de Gaulle.
Of course, yes. Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes.
Your mother,
my mother,
during the war, died in
concentration camp.
Yes,
yes, of course.
And
yes,
how did you escape?
Ravensbrück. Oh, that's a story. We'll be there tomorrow morning.
No. Tell me. Just
No, because it's a very extraordinary story. But let's say, to make a very long story short, that I probably owe my life, and that, you know, gives you something very special in life. I owe my life to an unknown German who had a girl of that age, of my age, that is 10, in Germany, and who left me and didn't take me on with my mother. So that is said very quickly. This is, in a way, the story.
And you spent the war where?
No, my mother was arrested on 22nd of June, 44, which was really the end of the war. So we had, my mother and I, when my father left for, to reach the goal, to find the goal through Spain, etc., and up to England, my mother and I came up to live in Paris, which was very imprudent in a way. But my mother thought she was, you know, safe and nothing would ever happen to her. People don't realize, you know, how dangerous. I mean, especially it was so dangerous at the time. And unfortunately, everything went all right until they were arresting anybody. You know, this was 3 weeks after landing in Normandy. Landing in Normandy. So they really would, you know, get anybody they could get. So they arrested my mother. My mother stayed in France. This is a horrible story. It's tragedy. Because she stayed in the prison of Fresnes near Paris for 2 months and a half. And she left by the last train of deportees, which left for Germany. The one after was stopped by the Allied forces. And when my father came on the 25th of August, went down the Champs-Élysées and met a friend and said, "Where are Lily Elizabeth, my mother, Lily and Philippine?" And the friend said, "Oh, but..." The face dropped, and they said, "You don't know?" "No, I don't know. What is it?" He didn't know his wife had been arrested, and so he ran to the prison, and she just left 5 or 6 days before. So, and I was hidden at that time in a little house in the country, and I was safe. So this is it. So that's, one of the historical tragedies, of course, history.
And how did he change the vineyard?
I wouldn't say my father changed the vineyard. I would never say that, because the vineyard, you see, there is this famous word of terroir.
Yes.
Terroir
the
means,
land, the soil.
It means more than that.
What?
It means the sun, the wind, the exposition. It means a lot of things. That's very interesting. Terroir seems to come from the word terre, which is, of course, the earth. You're right. But it does mean much more than that. And the terroir is essential. And the terroir of Mouton Rothschild has been the same for 200 years. So my father changed very little in the vineyard itself. The vineyard is exactly the wine we harvest today is the same wine as our ancestors harvested.
But who was the first in the family to put it in the bottles, to actually do...
My father.
That's what I thought. And that's changing, because rather than shipping the barrels...
You're absolutely right. But
he actually started putting it in the bottles.
Charlie, I wouldn't call that change in the vineyard. I would call that change in the vinification and the way things were done after the harvest. I mean, it's vinification. It's the fact of not keeping the wine in a barrel for 2 years. When you say the last label we did, her last label, my last label is 2004. And if you asked me who would be the painter for 205, first I wouldn't tell you, but if I knew, I wouldn't tell you, but I don't know.
Because the 204 is the label you're doing now. It's 204.
Yes, we're always 2 years late.
Stay with the history, because it's important to understand you because of this extraordinary life you've had and what you do now. So he's running the vineyard, and you go off to have a career in the theater.
Yes, yes.
And he's a very famous, the famous Baron Philippe Rothschild.
Yes, of course. But you see, he was a wonderful, genius man. Let me tell you something. You're talking about the label since 1945 done by painters. You're right. But there had been a once-off affair before in 1924. In 1924, to celebrate the first mise en bouteille, bottling of the chateau, and this decision that he'd made that all his harvest would be bottled at the chateau, and therefore he would be responsible for the whole thing. He asked an extraordinary poster designer called Jean Carlu, who's very well known, and his drawing is there in the exhibition. You could see it the day after tomorrow. He asked Jean Carlu to make a label. It's a sort of a cubist label, and it's a once-off idea. It was so pioneer that everybody in Bordeaux said this man is crazy. So it stopped until 45. But in fact, he was 22 then, and he already
he took it over when he was 20, wasn't he? 20 years old. He went.
He was born in 1902, so
Okay, take a look at this. We can see it. This shows you from the Carlu. First time an artist was commissioned to draw a label.
And there's a ram, like my ram here. See?
And then in 1945, we'll see this is a Philippe Julian. This is victory year.
Yes. What is amusing about this whole thing is when he did it in 45, when he had something put on his label, it was to celebrate return of peace, return home. The Nazis had occupied Mouton for 4 years. I mean, it was just something, a burst of joy to say that we were back home. That is the Churchill's Viva Victory, done by this rather poor artist, delightful friend. Philippe Julien was wonderful man, died now. But the Viva Victory, it was a symbol. And the interesting thing is, my father, it had a great success, even then, immediately. And my father said, let's celebrate a historical event. The next year, 46. Why not? Historical. There was no art, no question. But what was the great event in 46 was Gandhi's death. Gandhi, I never tell this story, so it's interesting for me to tell it to you. Gandhi had never touched a glass of wine. And so it suddenly appeared to my father how really empty it was to have the idea of a historical event, because you never know what the real important historical event is going to be. And through this sort of reflection of Gandhi, of this and that, he said, but I'm stupid, I'm not going to celebrate history, I'm going to do art. And that's how it began, in fact. So it was a sort of thing that came very slowly. And can I add something to this? For about 10 years, the artists were only friends. I mean, my father was lucky enough to have famous friends like Jean Cocteau, Léonore Fini, etc. But they were friends because no painter worthy of that name would put their signature on a bottle of wine that was going to be sold. It's very difficult to imagine this today, but a commercial art didn't exist. I mean, the painters, oh, no, that's under my standards. I can't do that. Until in 1955, and again, this is something that people don't know at all about, Georges Braque,
right,
who didn't even know my father, who just thought this man was doing something amusing and interesting, he came to us and said to us, to my father then, and said, could I make a drawing for your label? My father said, of course.
Why not? Yes, of course, we'd be thrilled.
Immediately, yes. And since then, they all came in. Since Braque had decided to do it, all the great painters, Masson, Villon, Dali, Henry Moore, everybody came into
Picasso.
Picasso much later, but they came into the picture. It's very interesting.
Is anybody you've wanted to do this refused to do it? Any great artist that you felt would be perfect and said, no, it's not for me?
No, not yet. But I'm expecting it can happen.
Why did they do
I'm thinking it's the other way around, actually, funnily enough. Sometimes my father was a bit naughty with painters. There's a man, a very well-known painter called Wasser, who died now. And he had done a painting for Mouton a long time ago, 25, 30 years ago. My father didn't like it. And so Wasser came. And Wasser, on an exhibition he'd done in Paris, he put the painting and he put underneath the painting, this painting was refused by Philippe de Rothschild for Mouton. So everybody was a great joke, which is true.
There's also this part of the history, the idea of achieving first run.
You mean that Mouton was classified first growth?
First growth, yes.
Oh, first growth, sorry.
First growth.
Yeah. That's quite true. In fact, Mouton had been classified in the 1855 classification as first of the seconds,
right,
which was a funny thing, a strange thing. I've always wondered why, and I think that there's a lot to do with this, the Bordeaux people were very stuffy and and this Jewish, what is this Jewish English man who bought this place? What is this? There was something like that. Maybe that Mouton wasn't classified first in 55. So when it was
first growth.
Yes, first growth. With the four others, Lafitte, Latour. Lafitte belongs to my cousins, of course. Lafitte Rothschild, Latour, Margot, and Aubryon. And in fact, when it was classified in 1973, in fact, most people thought that it was quite normal in a way because, it's a market that makes, which is normal, that makes the law. And Mouton was already selling long before 1973 for as much money as the other ones, really.
Okay. You were, as I said, an actress.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Had no intention to run the vineyard.
I'm not someone who looks into the future so much. I always live what's going on. My father was totally responsible. Great man. Great relationship with him. But he was a guru. You can't have two people responsible for something like that. So it didn't cross my mind that I was going to run Mouton. I knew that some very far away day it might happen. But my life wasn't made around that. And Mouton was always my holiday place. I always said my holiday place has become my working place. But it's always Mouton. I was there when I was a very little girl. I was already, I was acting in Mouton with all the little girls around.
Yes.
I was producing plays when I was 10, tragedies, of course. I was doing the king always. I was acting the king. That was when I was a little girl. But I always wanted to be in the theater. The theater's all, I can't remember not being in the theater. People say, well, how did you? No, I never thought. It just was obvious.
So how did you come to...
The only thing is my father said, if you're going to do it as better than others because you can't take people's money, you're going to be paid for, and so you must do it well. And he was right.
That was part of his value system. If you're going to do something, do it well and be number one. So he dies, and you take it over. You take over the leadership.
Yes, to be honest, I've been on the board. I'd been on the board for a long time. On the board of our company. We have a company and we market a lot of other wines. Mouton Cadet. We do many Amawas. I have a wine in Chile now. I have Opus One. I have the half of Opus One in California, which is a fabulous wine, etc., which was with the Mondavis now, etc. And so I had been involved in the wine business since the 80s, in fact. I would say yes, the 80s. So 88, when my father wasn't very well in the 80s, he started not being very well. So I had to really, I stopped. You can't do two things well, I don't think. So I really had to stop the theater in the 80s.
When did you begin the exhibiting of the labels?
You see, long before my father passed away, you say passed out or passed away?
Passed away.
Passed away.
Passed away.
Long before, and the funny thing is, in 81, I started that in 81. When I started, my father was amazed by this idea. Crazy. He thought it was a crazy idea. And I said, but your idea was crazy when you put some art on your label. Why can't I have a crazy idea? And so he was rather amused by that, finally. But at the same time, he was totally pessimistic. I remember he would say, but nobody's going to come and see your exhibition. What do you think? They won't be interested in seeing what you were. Nobody won't have any success at all. He was totally pessimistic, which was really not making things very easy. But I had, funnily enough, it's linked with America. I was in Beverly Hills in the 80s, and some people in large houses in Beverly Hills had stuck off the labels of Mouton and made a poster of them and put them not in their lavatory or in their bathroom, which I thought was, already, but no, in their hall, in their dining room. So the idea came to me like that. I thought to myself, if these people do something so crazy as to stick off labels, which is only a reproduction, of a painting, wouldn't they be interested to see the real thing? That's how it came.
And you were right. And how many times?
Yes.
And you've been doing that how often?
Oh, we were taken by SITES. SITES is a department of the Smithsonian in Washington. Yes. Smithsonian Institution of Traveling Exhibition Service, which traveled the exhibition around America. That's why I'm so linked with America. I'm so happy to be here. You see, for me, it's very important. We went in many, many cities, Atlanta and Houston and Dallas and wherever.
Okay, tell me about this. This is the 2004 bottle, and this is Prince Charles. All right, tell me about this.
Well, it was an interesting idea. He's a watercolorist.
Yes.
And he values very much. He's very an arty person. He loves art.
Right, architecture and art.
Yes, exactly. And I met him. His grandmother had been to Mouton in 1977. And the 1977 vintage doesn't bear any painting. It bears just the signature of Her Majesty the Queen Mother, who'd been to Mouton. So there was a sort of link there, the sort of tradition, if I may say. And the interesting thing was that simply the 2004 is the 100th anniversary of the Entente Cordiale. That's really the reason. And I'm sure Prince Charles would not have done it if it hadn't been for a very good reason. That is celebration. It's written on the label, by the way.
Yes.
To celebrate, he's written it in his own...
To celebrate the 100th anniversary.
Voilà. Of the Entente Cordiale.
Yes,
That's right, Charles.
Now,
so that's the real reason why he decided that he would put his name on it.
You're also going to have an auction.
Yes.
From your private cellar.
Yes, but it's a little piece of my private cellar.
Yeah, of course, tiny little piece.
Yeah.
How much?
There are a bit more. You have the catalogue there, so.
Oh, yes. We do. Yes.
You have the catalogue. You're more knowledgeable
Chateau
than me.
Mouton Rothschild, treasures from their private cellar, Baroness Philippine. This is...
exactly.
There it is, and you'll see the kinds of things that...
Yes, there are great wines that are going to be sold, but it's very small quantities, let me put it that way. There is something which is very extraordinary, which is a Jeroboam of 1945. Of course, that's the mythical year for Mouton. 1945 is the year the 12 bottles of 45 sold for, I don't even remember what price, in Los Angeles 2 months ago or something like that. I mean, the 45 is something...
What made it so great?
Because it's an extraordinary wine.
Yeah.
You see, there's never any... I don't think quality is... quality is the key word. And I think when there's such quality, it's not marketing. It's really quality. 45 is an amazing year. I mean, there were two English journalists, talking together about 1945 3 or 4 years ago at a dinner at home. And one was saying to the other, I'm not sure it's quite ready to drink. Can you imagine?
The great years have been... 61,
yes,
86,
82,
2000.
No, 86, you're absolutely right, well done.
2000.
82, 86, 2000, 2003.
They're saying that 2005 is extraordinary.
Yes, it is. Yes, I think it's going to be very extraordinary. But personally, I don't like to make pronostics. Do you say pronostics?
Prognostications, yes.
Okay, oh, that's a new word for me. I don't like to make that sort of thing with such young minds. I'm always rather terrified of journalists, not like you, journalists saying before the harvest has been done, oh, it's going to be quite extraordinary. I mean, wait, a wine is a very special beverage. It's so different to the other beverages. That's what makes it sort of glory and value. It evaluates all the time. And some of the vintages that we're not even talking about now suddenly become extraordinary. Like, for instance, I will quote 87. If people are listening to us, wine people, they will say, what is she talking about? 87 is a very bad year. Well, tell them to try 87. It's delicious. It's becoming delicious. It's evaluating. That's what's so amusing with wine.
You have had to meet the challenge of the marketplace. You developed Mouton Cadet, is it? Mouton
Cadet?
To meet the meet the lower price level for wine, yes?
Yes, of course, yes. That, by the way, my father created Mouton Cadet, which was really rather extraordinary. My father had, he was a sort of genius in a way. I mean, he's the first person, by the way, because this is something really deep, who said making wine is art. A great wine is art. So for him, it was normal to put art on his bottle. It was something very normal. And, of course, creating the Museum of Wine in Art, which is our museum, which I hope you'll visit one day when you come to France, because that is also extremely special. I mean, it's one of the most exciting and most remarkable private museums in France. I mean, and that is in Mouton. Everybody who visits the cellars visits the Museum of Wine and Art. So he's had a sort of thing about that, always, my father.
But my point was, you've had to meet competition and a changing wine market. You have a vineyard in Chile.
Yes,
so you had a relationship with Robert Mondavi.
Of course, yes. The strong one.
It is said that France is losing its share of the wine market. That it used to have 30%, say, or more 10 years ago, and now it's about 15%. Is that a fair appraisal?
I don't quite agree with that point of view. I think one has to be very careful what the media say and what the real truth is. And I would be very blunt about this. I think in Bordeaux we make much too much bad wine. So you see, in a way, I'm agreeing with what you're saying. We are not good enough in selecting sometimes our wines, but we're talking of mediocre wines when I say that. I think the great wines of Bordeaux have a future. I don't think they have no problem. And there
will always be a demand for great wines from Bordeaux.
Absolutely. And if the Californians make just as good wines as Bordeaux, so much the better. I'm very happy if other people make good wine, because it means that we were right to do what we're doing. I mean, the Californian wines are fabulous now. They are wonderful. Of course, but the Californians we have 200 years of making wine, but the Californians now have 80 or 90 years of making wine, which is a tradition, which is a long time. I mean, it's normal that they make great wines, and they do.
You have 3 children, yes? 2 sons and a daughter.
Yes, right.
Now, it is said that 2 sons will take over.
Yes.
When will you hand it over to the sons?
Do I have to say today? No answer to that.
You're having a good time.
Yes, no, I mean, to be honest, I'm delighted of what they're doing. I'm delighted if they take more importance. I'm delighted that they like Mouton. Let me tell you one thing. I think what is important is the family business side. Family businesses are dying, and it's very important to make them live up and be able to pass, I hope our rights, are so high, and so it's very difficult now in France. There are many properties that are being sold, very sadly, to big groups instead of remaining in the same family. So I'm very lucky to have my 2 sons, and I'm very happy that they are going to, to be
good there. For you. I want to just run through some of these labels before we leave. We showed the Brock. Next is Salvador Dali from 1958.
Where's Dali? Yes.
Oh,
yes, he did the little sheep. Yes.
Miro from 1969.
That's a beautiful one. That's beautiful, yes.
These are really terrific. Just give you a
Yes.
sense of what you can see.
Yes, because, Charlie, I hope you come and see the exhibition. I hope many people come and see this exhibition, because what you see is quite different. You see, it's not at all the same size.
Yes.
You see, the paintings in the exhibition are from... Braque did a very small painting, for instance.
Right.
He did... But Motherwell did a thing like that.
Okay.
And Andy Warhol did... They've done very
I'm going to
large.
show them. Chagall, 1970.
Yeah, 1970, yes.
And here's Chagall, 1970. And here's the
Yes.
famous Picasso, 1973, a special label to celebrate the reclassification of Mouton to first growth,
Exactly.
premier cru, and
Premier Cru, well done.
and to commemorate Picasso's death.
Yes. It was the year of his death.
The next one is the Picasso label in its exhibit glass case.
Oh, good.
There it is.
Ah, yes, and now it shows, because that is what is, the exhibition is done in these sort of butterfly cases, quite thick. And so it means there's a common denominator, which was absolutely essential, considering the difference in size of all these paintings.
The next is the Andy Warhol, 1975. That's the Baron Philippe de Rothschild.
That's my father's
Now,
portrait.
get this. This is interesting. The next one is John Huston from 1982. Great year.
Great year, and if I tell you all my tribulations with John Huston, I went to Puerto Vallarta to see him.
Yes.
That was, can I tell you the story?
Yes, please.
It was my father's 60th harvest at Mouton.
Yeah.
And so my father was saying, could we put on the label that somebody that could write to my friend or to Philippe for his 60th. I said, why not John Huston's a friend of yours? He was a friend of my stepmother and everything. And so my father says, oh, John will never do a painting for Mouton. He won't want that. I said, let me go and ask him. So I took my little suitcase and I went to Mexico and I went to John Huston and we became quite friendly about 2 days. I spent 2 days looking at boxing matches.
Yes.
I knew nothing about boxing. Now I know more thanks to John. After 2 days, John said, darling, you've come for something. What have you come for? I know you've come to see me. And I said, but John, I've come because my father would like you to do a drawing from what... Oh, your father will never take a drawing of mine for your... So there was one on one side, my father saying, John will never do it. And there was John saying, your father will never... So I had to put these two gurus, these two Buddhas together.
And there it is.
And there it is.
All right, next is Francis Bacon in 1990.
That was wonderful also. His wonderful relationship with Francis Bacon. He was an extraordinary man.
And then the next one from 1993.
Balthus, that was a
Balthus.
problem. I'm not sure you should show
The
that.
controversial nude girl label
Yes,
that
yes,
inspired some recall protest in the United
what I was
States.
accused of, Mr.
What?
Rose?
What were
I
you
was accused of doing kiddie porn.
Oh, no.
I don't think that was quite in my...
No, that was not your intent.
Not really, no.
Robert Wilson in 2001.
Ah, that's a great,
Bob
great
Wilson,
friend.
Yes.
And he made a sort of portrait of me. It's not really... It's very, very glorified.
Next is Prince Charles, the one we talked about,
Yes.
too. This is the bottle
Yes,
here
yes, of
to be
course.
unveiled this year.
Yes,
Commemorates the
yes.
centenary of the
He calls it
Dayton
Mediterranean
Cardial.
Pines.
He calls it what?
Mediterranean Pines on the Cap d'Antibes.
There you go. It's great to have you on this program.
Thank you.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
And much success
having me.
this weekend with the exhibit and also the auction.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.